You're listening to the MurphologyPodcast. Thanks for tuning in to the MurphologyPodcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over the U.S. Each week we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Well, this week is a great interview with Dave Puffer. Dave works at Bike World in Des Moines, and he is on the show this week to talk about his cycling adventure riding the Great Divide. The Great Divide is about 2,800 miles of pedaling from Alberta, Canada, through British Columbia, and then south through Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and finally through New Mexico, all the way to the Mexico border. Dave's expertise in long-distance cycling tours, along with the help of maps from Adventure Cycling, resources from bikepacking.com, and a book by Michael McCoy called Cycling the Great Divide, got him and his friend Gary through 33 days and some of the best scenery he's ever seen. So here's my interview with Dave Puffer. Enjoy. All right, well, on the show today is Dave Puffer. Hey, Dave.
Good morning, Kathy. How you doing?
Good. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today, and the topic is going to be adventure cycling, and I'm so excited to hear your story.
Great. I'm excited to tell it.
I've watched videos of you giving a presentation about a recent trip that you did. Let's call it an epic recent trip doing the Great Divide. So I know that I want to catch up on a lot of what happened on that trip and how you did it and what kind of gear you had. But first, do you want to give the listeners just a high level of where you live and what cycling is like there?
Yeah, sure. So my interest in cycling started back in the 80s, early 80s, actually probably late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll give you an idea how old I am. Anyways, I kind of grew up with some of the pioneers of mountain biking, the Keith Bontraggers and a lot of the people that were really, instrumental in bringing kind of the mountain bike and even outdoors bicycling into the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I started racing some, and then always in the back of my mind, I always was kind of the hiker and camper and always thought that I'd like to take a journey across the United States at some point.
Mm-hmm.
After high school and between college semesters and primarily the summer semester, I was on a scholarship in college, so I didn't really have to work, which was glorious.
Yeah.
So between my freshman and sophomore year, I decided I was going to ride my bike across the country because I was kind of poor and I couldn't really afford to drive. So I decided the best way of doing that is by bike. And so I got some old panniers from a friend and then just headed off. Not really sure exactly where I was going,
Wow.
but I knew I had about 2.5 months to do it. So.
And were you solo?
I was solo.
Wow.
Yeah. So the first trip I was living in LA, so I was kind of half the battle was already won because I was starting on the West Coast and I knew I was going to go to the East Coast. And so I kind of stayed between the 20 and 40 corridors of the interstates and just kind of started riding. This is before you really had GPS systems, and I had some state maps, but I wanted to stay obviously off the interstate, so you're just kind of trying to go east. And 2,500 miles later, I was on the East Coast, and then from there, I just had to work my way back. So
wow,
it was glorious. Yeah.
And obviously, the bug stayed with you because you are still doing those sorts of adventures when you have time.
Yeah, I kind of equate it to I really feel I was born 30 years too early because although I really enjoyed the cycling on pavement, this whole new world of bike packing is really, I think, would be where my interest would have laid back then and definitely now. So.
And you mentioned LA, but where are you living now?
I'm actually in Iowa, so I'm in Des Moines.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent most of my adult life in California working, and some 12 years ago, my wife and I decided to move back to the Midwest, and set down some roots here, and it's been a nice journey so far.
And I'm sure listeners know that I also live in Iowa, and we have to brag just a little bit about what is in Iowa as far as biking, like terrain, because it's not a flat state. Even, people who just drive on Interstate 80 and go through Iowa, there is every kind of terrain you can think of. Of course, we don't have mountains, but we do have elevation, and we do have farm roads, and we have gravel and mountain biking, and of course, road riding.
Yeah, absolutely. The beauty of this state is, you're saying rolling hills, a lot of gravel roads. I think if you added up all the miles of gravel roads in Iowa, it far surpassed the paved roads.
Right.
And so, that's opened up a whole nother world of this gravel biking, and which is kind of parallels bike packing quite a bit. I know I work for a company that carries treks, and it's been the last 4 or 5 years where this whole gravel bike explosion has occurred, and now it's one of our top sellers.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I jumped on that bandwagon, got my first gravel bike this year, and it's still hard to believe that I can say that, because I would almost say it was within, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago, if I would see a gravel road, my bike would just fall over. Like, I just couldn't even understand the dynamics of riding on loose rocks. And now that you have the right equipment, it's so fun, and just the places that you can see.
Exactly. Yeah. The whole nother world of with people on pavement roads, this distractions you have with texting and driving. If you can get out there in the back roads, I think it's not only from an adventure standpoint a lot more appealing, it's also safer.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Right. So let's get into, you have been on quite a few different epic adventures. And when I say epic, I'm talking about not week-long tours, but I'm talking about months on the road with you and your bicycle. I think your most recent one was the Great Divide. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah, I kind of fell in love with what I consider bike packing. Was there again back in the early, actually 19, or right after the first Gulf War. I did Central America. This is back before bike packing was even evolving, and I kind of had to, because in Central America you have a lot of dirt and roads that are muddy and nasty, and I actually took a mountain bike on that, and it was a wonderful trip, and there again, and I was thought, this in the back of my mind, I always think, why isn't this happening more? And I think it was just kind of those evolution things that come about. And I think it was 5 years ago. There's a fantastic company, it's Adventure Cycling Association, and they started mapping out what you would consider bike packing routes. Probably, I guess it's probably about 15 years ago now, and it's been quite the process. But people just got in, they started mapping out routes with GPSs and started doing it, and then we can benefit from all their hard work is just going on their site and downloading the maps and going. I mean, the hard work is done.
Yeah.
There's a whole nother website now. It's not necessarily new, but it's bikepacking.com. There again, you got all these wonderful routes, some, long weekend routes, some 1 week routes, and some that are epic, 2-month routes. So, it's just a glorious time to be in that whole bikepacking world.
And I was just going to add to that, with bikepacking.com, they also have like all kinds of videos, like YouTube videos that, if you're new to bike packing, which I'm sure most people understand, but bike packing is when you are self-contained. So you're bringing everything that you need for overnight, whether it's tent or hammock or a tarp, but everything is on your bike.
Correct.
But that website is so valuable. Actually, both websites that you mentioned.
Yeah, in particular, bikepacking.com, because it's not only a resource for mapped routes and everything, but it's also a fantastic resource for equipment, your gear that you're going to be carrying, types of bikes to to use, food to bring, watch out for this, watch out for that, so it's a all-inclusive kind of one-stop shopping world, really. I mean, and then adventure cycling there again is just they're the kind of the pioneers of all the mapping of all these different routes.
Yeah, and I've interviewed quite a few people that have used adventure cycling for their, if they're going across the U.S. And the nice thing about those maps is they've been around for decades. So a lot of those towns come to expect seeing cyclists and, staying in churchyards or using restrooms.
Correct. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So you did, tell us about Great Divide. Like, what exactly is that?
Wow. So the Great Divide is starting up in Alberta, Canada, and then you kind of traverse into British Columbia, into the States. The route itself is about 2,800 miles, and you end up in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. So you go Alberta to BC and to Montana. A little bit of Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and New Mexico, and you're following the spine of the Continental Divide the entire time. So,
and you're on a bicycle, right? This is a bicycle ride.
Yep, we were both. I went with my best friend Gary Hall, and we decided to do it. There was quite a bit of planning involved. Logistically, there's kind of a challenge because you got to get to Canada, and his wife was gracious enough to take us up there and drop us off. And all we had to do is ride to the Mexico border, and that's where my wife picked us up. So, but in between it's just it's an amazing adventure. I mean, you have this wonderful machine, a bicycle that you're putting your house on it basically, and you're riding day to day to some of the most beautiful scenery in America. So it's if you love or if you even like camping and you like bicycling, I don't think there's any better thing you can do.
And you mentioned it was 2,800 miles. How long did that take you to ride?
Depending on, there's some alternates you can take that are longer. I think we rode for 33 days. We were kind of in a time crunch with work and life. So we basically doubled up the days of what they call for. It's kind of mapped out on a 70-day route.
Oh my!
There's an incredible, I consider it the Bible of the writing the Great Divide. It's a book by Michael McCoy, and I think it's as essential as the maps are. It's just a wonderful resource. He goes into different towns, what to expect, what you might want to be. He gets you set up for each day, on if it's going to be a hard day, if it's going to be easy day, what to expect, what things to look for. You have to go through a gate and make sure you close it behind you. Wildlife, camping. Make sure you bring enough water for the next 4 days because there is none.
Oh my gosh!
So it's just I would literally consider it the Bible of cycling the Great Divide.
Right, and to be able to read ahead what your next day is going to be like. That's pretty nice to have. Wow. And
there's probably some other resources out there, but I found his about as spot on as anything. So
yeah. Do you have a few favorite moments that you have top of mind?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is just the scenery. And that's the beauty of bikepacking, is because you never know what's around the next turn. You don't ever know what's around up over the next hill or next divide crossing. So it's all just a huge adventure. We were part of it was stressful. We were going later in the year, and so we knew there were some storms chasing us out of the west. So we knew we were going to get snowed on. We just didn't know how much. So that adds a little bit of intrigue to the whole adventure. But yeah, if anywhere from running into a bull moose where you're
Oh
having
my,
a standoff in the middle
jeez.
of the trail and wondering what he's going to do, and maybe he's wondering what we're going to do, and to these wonderful glacial lakes that you're finding in Montana and Wyoming, and the basin of Wyoming is incredible, where you're high desert and you're surrounded by wild horses and pronghorn antelope. Of course, we all know Colorado's it's glorious scenery. And then New Mexico's got the Gila Mountains and the desert. So, I mean, it's I think it's got everything that America can offer
Mm-hmm.
in a trip, and then maybe then some more, that's things you wouldn't ever expect to see, and you got these memories in the mind probably forever.
Right.
Of this, just I think if I had to pinpoint any one particular area that was absolutely glorious, would be the basin of Wyoming. I thought was just amazing. The sunsets and the vastness of it, and the Gila mountain range in New Mexico. You would never expect these majestic forests in New Mexico, but they are there.
Mm. So what goes along with beautiful scenery and mountains is interesting terrain. So give us an idea of what maybe there probably wasn't a typical day, but I mean, are you talking major elevation? Are you actually biking through these mountains, or are you finding secret paths that keep you flat?
Yeah, we rode the map, the route itself. That's from adventure cycling,
Mm-hmm.
and so I guess to equate it, we were doubling up the miles that they'd call for. So instead of one pass a day, we were typically doing two passes. So you're climbing, probably 6 to 10,000 feet per day
Wow.
of climbing. I think the whole route itself is about 190,000 feet of elevation change. But it's not, and a lot of people get caught up in the climbing part of it. It's not flat. There's a lot of hills and everything, but like you were saying, there's no mountains to train on. So I think an important thing to remember is that if you're in a good, I just say physical shape, if you
Mm-hmm.
got a good base of cycling, anybody can do this route.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing technical about it. I mean, you're on secondary forest roads. You're climbing a lot, but you find that you ride yourself into shape. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you can have a good base going, but you get used to climbing those days, and you got to consider, you got a full day of doing it, so you got good 8 to 10 hours of cycling a day. So there's no reason why you can't take breaks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not saying that it's easy, because it's not, but it's completely doable. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, especially if you do the 70 days. In a lot of ways, I wish we had that kind of time, because I think when you're pushed for time, you don't take the time that you really want to really enjoy the areas you're in.
Sure. And I think a lot of it too has to do with your bicycle choice. So, do you want to give us a highlight of what bike you had? And
Yeah, so I the first route I did was, I guess going back, I've used trucks in the past for some of my tours and stuff, and this on the Continental Divide, I used a Salsa Fargo,
mm,
because going back, the was it 5 years ago. This is kind of it was the kind of one name out there, Salsa, that really made a dedicated bike packing bike.
mm-hmm,
Since then, Trek has come out with an 1120, and Specialized has got theirs, and but it was kind of like the go-to bike, and it was wonderful. I mean, I had a triple chain ring up front, which I was glad I had, because I'm old and I like that grinding gear. It's just to spin up after you've been pedaling uphill for 3 and 4 hours, it's nice to drop down into a low gear and kind of spin your way up the rest
mm-hmm,
of it. I know more modern bikes now have a single up front chain ring. And I don't know. There's people that have done the Continental Divide on a single speed. So it's completely doable with most bikes. I think more important is being able to carry your house on your bike. So having eyelets for racks, and there's a whole new world of dry bags and seat bags and frame bags and handlebar bags and fork bags. And so it's a nice world to be in now for bike packing, because all these companies have made things that strap onto your bike without needing racks and all these other things. So.
And the bike is definitely important, but like you said, you have to remember that you're carrying your house on that bike plus your body. So did you ever weigh your bike?
Yeah, so the bike itself was about 28 pounds, and then the gear added another, just the gear dry without any fluid or water, was another 25 pounds. So you consider you're already 50 something pounds. And I remember one point in New Mexico, we were carrying about 11 liters of water. So
Wow.
You got another almost 30 pounds of fluid on top of it. So yeah, you're packed down. So yeah, you have to have strong wheels. A lot of that load's being pushed to the rim. So I think as important as the componentry on the bike is a good set of wheels that can carry that load without breaking spokes and being stuck in the middle of nowhere.
Any like tips on gear choices? You mentioned dry bags, which is probably super, super important, but did you go for super lightweight tents and clothing and sleeping bags?
Yes, to all. Yeah, back when, so there again, the last 5 years has just been instrumental in new companies coming out with all this bike packing gear. But when I was getting ready for it, I spent a year kind of planning for it. The go-to company was Revelate Designs. And they made kind of everything. They had the seat bags, the frame bags, the handlebar bags, and since then there's a number of smaller niche companies out there that have come up with what I consider fantastic designs and quality. And I think quality is, if you're going to spend as much on your equipment as you do on a good bike.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Be prepared for that. So yeah, and you're always trying to cut out grams and ounces everywhere. The sleeping bags. I mean, sleeping bags can range anywhere from under a pound to 5 pounds, and then not else to consider is the bulkiness of them. So you want something that's packable. Wool is a wonderful part of all of the equipment, from base layers, shorts and underwear and tights and jerseys and socks. It wicks away moisture very well. So when you're hot, it kind of helps keep you a little bit cooler. And then when it's cold, it helps keep your warmth in it, and it dries well. So I think if I could give any kind of advice, is don't skimp on gear, because it can literally save your life. Yeah.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show. And I'm assuming that you are seeing all kinds of climate as far as, the time of year you were there. It sounds like there was an opportunity for snow, but then if you're ending in New Mexico, I'm guessing you experienced some heat as well.
Yeah, there was nights where we were waking up in the single digits. I remember up in BC, it was single digits overnight, and then when we're in the higher elevations of Montana, we got snowed on quite a bit. So yeah, and then to answer your question about New Mexico, 100 plus degrees in the baking sun, where there's no shade, none. I mean, so yeah, you have to be prepared for all that that and then the other big thing is there's times where you're not going to see another town for 3 and 4 days. So
Yeah.
you have to be prepared. Food is obviously the beauty of the Continental Divide is that you eat as much as you possibly can eat or want to eat, because you're not going to gain any weight. You're still going to lose weight on the trip. You just cannot take enough calories in
Sure.
to sustain your weight probably when you left, if you're pushing hard.
Which you were if you were doing double days. Yeah. Then the hard part is figuring out food that's going to give you energy but doesn't weigh too much.
Right. Yeah. We survived on freeze-dried food for dinners, and two hungry guys. In the back of your mind, you're when you're portioning out food, it's like, I'm trying to get an extra couple ounces that he doesn't get. And you're when you're riding through the day, it's like, how many Cliff Bars do I have? Maybe I can hide one from Gary, and so yeah, some of that the natural survival skills come into play. And even though you love your brother you're riding with, you're still in the back of your mind is thinking, God, am I going to run out of food? Or worse, am I going to run out of water? So
right.
And that brings up a whole nother conversation of if you're doing a kind of a what I consider an epic ride like this, if you're going to go with somebody, which I strongly suggest you do, because going out by yourself on something like that, I wouldn't necessarily advise. You have to really like that person. There's times where you're tired and you're hungry and you're grumpy and you don't know what's around the next turn. And if you, I guess it's easy to blow a gasket and get upset with the person if you don't really enjoy their company.
Sure. And that kind of goes to my next question, which, you were either stuck or with Gary nonstop every single day. But how about interacting with other people? Like, would you go days and days without seeing another person or town?
Yeah, there's typically not any days you would without, because when you're up high, if you're in the Wind River range and you're not going to be in a real town for the next couple of days, you still run across hunter. It was hunting season, so running across some hunters and sometimes some other hikers, and there seems to be outposts here and there where there are people. But that's another part of the whole experience is not only the scenery and the majesty of the country, but it's also the people you meet along the way. It's when you're beat up and tired of being backcountry in the mountains for the last 3 days and you come into a town, I'm sure you're not only looking pretty haggard, but you're feeling pretty haggard. And people want to hear what you're doing. They want to listen to your story so far. And people are good. I mean, they want to take you in. I remember coming into the base of the Teton Mountains, and we ran across a couple who we had been rained and snowed on, and we were muddy and dirty and hungry, and we just were asking them where a good place to eat was, and they insisted we came back to stay with them. And they were up at 5 o'clock the next morning making us a 5-course meal to get us on our way. And so, yeah, stuff like that. We were Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and the guy wanted us to stay with him. And next morning he had left us a bag of socks and a couple of shirts and stuff. And he was one of the executives at Smart Wool. So, it's just things like that people is part of the journey. Yeah.
As far as, you mentioned sometimes you got to stay at people's homes, but like for me, when I'm on a multi-day tour, which, I'm not as roughing it as you were on this trip, but for me, staying warm and staying dry are huge. Probably not more about the safety of hypothermia, because I'm not in a condition or place where I'm nervous about that, but just comfort level. So any points on that?
Yeah, you think you're prepared sometimes, and when you're being snowed and sleeted on for hours at a time, um, I had some very top end Gore-Tex shell that would actually, it bled through, and you're thinking the last thing that thing is going to do is bleed through. So
Yeah.
we we um, we were in Colorado, and we went to an outdoor store, and we both got a second Gore-Tex shell to go over our main one just
Wow.
because it was bleeding through. And you're right, you're pushing really hard, but you can still risk the chance of being hypothermic.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you're working really hard, and obviously when you stop, you're in the middle of nowhere, and getting dry is super important. So
Right.
I think one of the main things to remember from that is that you bring very high quality dry bags, and whatever you do, it doesn't matter how cold you are when you're riding, you keep at least one base layer of dry stuff. So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. That's for night. That's for climbing in your sleeping bag when
Mm-hmm.
it's 15 degrees out and you're going to be dry. Yeah,
That's a great
essential.
tip.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. As far as the elements, is there anything that beats you up mentally? Like, oh my gosh, this is happening again today?
Yeah. It's a wonderful world to be back there, but you have to be prepared for the being off road. I mean, washboard roads. I remember you're so sick of washboard roads where you can't get on the edge of the road enough to where you're out of it, and it just pounds you for hundreds of miles at a
Mm.
time. And I remember you don't really notice, but when I get back to work, my one of my coworkers said, "Look at your forearms," and I, look at him, and he's like, "God, they're huge." And it's just like you're working those muscles so hard that it's got bigger. And so, but yeah, and then the mud is another huge consideration. There's some of those areas, the mud just gets sucked up into your derailleurs, and people want to push through it, but you got to be careful. You
Mm-hmm.
just got to take the time to clean all that stuff out of your pulleys and your chain rings, and between the frame, because you destroy your drivetrain, and then you're really stuck.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So yeah, all that stuff is a consideration. You're trying to make it to the next town or the next campsite, but you have to take the time to clean all that stuff out before you get in real trouble.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of real trouble, did you have any mishaps that are worth mentioning?
Oh, not really. We were really lucky. When it was all said and done with the weather, we got snowed on a few times, but it was never more than that 2 inch to 3 inch snow. Um, and weather-wise, thunderstorms were, you're pushing through some big thunderstorms,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't get hit too hard with those. Uh, I, I do remember one time where my I consider myself the weak link of our tour, and my buddy is, I would consider the real mountain man and do it all person. And we were riding, and I was tired. I looked at him, he looked tired, and I just asked him what he was thinking, and he gave me kind of a blank stare and said, "You know what I think we're done." Because we were running from a storm that was coming out of Washington, and uh and then it wasn't 5 minutes later, he blew a tire,
Mm.
and there was sealant all over my face because I was dragging behind him. And we got to this national park that was closed, and we set our tent up in one of the overhangs of an outhouse. And yeah, that was probably the low point, I would say. We were cold and wet and hungry, and he had a blown tire, and I'm thinking that, well, shoot, if Gary's worried about this, maybe I should be worried about this
Right,
too.
right.
And we still had, half the drop to do. So yeah, you don't, day to day, it's all a new adventure, and
Mm-hmm.
you take the highs with the lows. And when we were in New Mexico and we were baked, it was 100 degrees plus, and there is no shelter. There is no trees to stay out of the sun with, and
Mm-hmm.
there's these incredible people that they're kind of like trail angels, they call them, where they leave water out. They know it's on the route of the divide, and they leave these usually totes of, they fill up every day or whenever they need to, of gallons of water.
Wow.
And they'll leave crackers and peanut butter and all these things in there, and those are vital. I mean, you're going through several liters of water a day, or and then to find them on the side of the road and fill up and leave them a few bucks for the next group is essential. Yeah. So trail angels are exactly that. They're trail angels. Yeah.
And I never even asked, but I'm assuming you succeeded in completing this adventure.
Yeah, we finished up, and we finished with and another great thing is you do run across others that are doing it.
Oh, yeah.
It's getting more popular, people are going south and north, and psychologically it doesn't sound like a good idea to me, because I think you're going uphill all the time going north, but it's usually about the same elevation change,
Right.
regardless of which way you go. No, we ended up riding with a couple out of Indiana that were fantastic. And then we picked up an Italian guy, Renato, who we rode with probably the last 12 days, and a girl from the Netherlands that Rose, who finished. She got heat exhaustion and had to go to the hospital for a few days, but she met back up with us 4 days later, and so we finished as a group.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so, and then you learn their stories and learn about their lives, and you camp with them, and yeah, it's just an amazing journey all in all.
Looking at overall the epic adventure, any pro tips that you would pass along, like must bring items or must do things, or you mentioned wool, which I think is a huge tip because wool's so lightweight and packs really compact, and then with the whole being wet, wool is good. Any other pro tips?
Yeah, everybody has their own idea of food. I even though you get sick of freeze dried dinners, they pack a lot of calories. It'll keep you going, and they're extremely lightweight. So they don't pack the best, but they're really light. And then I think just very good gear. I think it's if you're going to be riding, if there's during the season where there's a chance of snow, or you're going to be baking, just make sure you have all your ducks in a row. I carried extra screws, if you brake pads, obviously if you get flats, I think I'm pretty well prepared, and I'm a pretty decent mechanic myself, but some unseen things, like I was running tubeless and a rock kicked up and broke my valve off. Well, goodness gracious, what do you do from there? So carry extra valves if you're running tubeless, extra sealants. You can cut a tire, so bring an extra tire. And then other things, like if you get really in a jam, chainring bolts, obviously, all your tools to fix flats, and a lube, and all these other things that come along. You're always going to be running into bike shops here and there, but sometimes you have 300 miles before you're at the next bike shop, and that's if they're open, if you're on the weekend, or but I think when it's all said and done, follow the there again, the bikepacking.com is a great resource for breaking down what you should have and maybe what's not necessary. You don't have to carry 5 ball caps or with you, one for each day.
Right.
But, you want to keep it simple, but be prepared. Yeah, some kind of very good, raincoat is essential. A good helmet, I think, is essential. Wool and base layers and a good pair of cycling shorts and just kind of common sense things. But they can make the difference between a horrible trip and a great trip.
And of course, you mentioned you were doing a route that's already been established through adventure cycling. If this is probably a silly question, but obviously you didn't have electricity very often. So were you using some sort of GPS device, or were you good old school paper maps?
Yeah, I had a GPS. I used it a few times, and we. So the big mistake we did make was second guessing the maps. We ordered all the maps through Adventure Cycling, and they're extremely detailed. It's got all the topography. It's got all the elevation change. It's got all the routes, and there's a lot of disclaimers in there that tell you to watch out for, this crossing and make sure you go through this gate. And if you missed the gate and you've gotten to this point, you've gone too far. You have to backtrack. And the maps are really good about describing that if you're coming into an area that is questionable especially if you're in a lot of times you're going into state parks or national parks, and there's you got to make sure you take the right turn. So we made a mistake of second guessing the maps and then going off track maybe 15-20 miles and then using the GPS to get back on track. But for the most part we were old school physical maps with the GPS on hand, and did use it a couple times. I think if you're going to go solo, probably an essential part of the equipment would be getting a spot tracker, so the loved ones at home can follow you. And if your spot hasn't moved in a couple days, then they at least know where you're at, and maybe you're in trouble of some kind. Yeah,
that's a good tip. Do you have any trips in your future?
Yeah, so the next trip I plan on doing is it's been mapped out the last, I guess it's going on year 3 now, but 2 years complete. It's called the Wild Wild West, and that's going to be essentially the Continental Divide, just a little bit further west. So it starts up in Roosevelt, right on the border. It's all U.S. It's not Canada, but it's the same distance. You kind of start in Montana and then swing into Idaho, do the whole Panhandle, and then go into Utah and then Arizona. So different states, but you're still about 2,900 miles, about 180,000 feet of climbing, and you're actually in more national forest on that route as you are in the Continental Divide.
Oh, okay. And is that also adventure cycling map?
Yeah, so that's on Adventure Cycling, and it's also on bikepacking.com now.
Oh, okay.
So you can check that out.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other thing, is that there's so many bikepacking routes, long weekends that are close to here. I mean, you got up in Minnesota, you got the Straddle and Paddle, you got Chequamegon in Wisconsin, you got South Dakota. So there's a lot of places just around here you can do some bike packing.
Yeah. And we could probably talk hours about just the scenery and the beauty in each of those locations. Like everything's so different.
Yeah. I did the paddle and straddle last fall, and it's just a 180-mile loop. So you park your car at Temper State Park, and then you just do a 3-day ride, 60 miles each day. It's flat as flat can be. So there's part of getting into bikepacking is you kind of want to get out and do what they call 24 hours rides, where you do an overnighter somewhere and see what works for you, see what doesn't work, what kind of stove you might want, what kind of food you like doing, what's simple, and do some shakedown cruises before you do something epic. And the paddle and straddles to me is perfect, because 2 nights on the route, and then you finish the day going through some along Lake Superior. It's just absolutely beautiful. You go through Grand Marais, where you can stop and have a good lunch and a nice cold one if you want.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's just, I think it's the perfect, long weekend route to get ready for something bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And back to your Wild Wild West adventure, is that coming up in the next couple years or this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be this year. I plan on going to, I'm taking off next month, and I'm doing what I consider some of the best mountain bike routes along 5 states. I'm going to do Northern California, Oregon, some Idaho, Utah, and Arizona. And that's just going to be like day mountain biking, kind of higher elevation routes, and just check out some true mountain biking. And then hopefully next year will be the Wild Wild West.
Nice. Well, to end it out, any sort of what's the key, in your opinion, or good advice to give somebody who's considering doing long distance cycling?
Yeah, I think a part of the whole thing is a good support mechanism. Obviously, work. I'm blessed to have Bike World allow me the time to do trips like this. I have a wonderful wife that's willing to hold down the fort and take care of all the necessities while I'm gone playing, and I think as long as you have all those things going for you, then do it. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to go. It's especially in today's world, not get on the whole political wagon, but we're living in kind of funky times right now, and boy, if you can take the time to do something like that, just to get out and enjoy some of the country, do it. Yeah, don't put it on the back burner. Just a short note on that is like I when the whole Continental Divide thing came up, I was just kind of half kidding to my buddy, talking to him and saying, hey, let's put the Continental Divide on the back burner and maybe plan to do it. And he's like, well, hell with that. Let's put it on the front burner and do it. And I was like, oh crap, what did I just get myself into?
But looking back, aren't you so glad that you did?
Yeah. And it's just one of those magical things. It's I mean, some people call it life changing. It's just one of those. It's definitely a bucket list thing to do.
Yeah.
I have several customers that have done it since I've done it, just maybe spurring them on a little bit, and I think they are unanimously, there's nothing they would have changed about it, and there's no regrets whatsoever.
And we never really did, so we need to give a plug out to Bike World, because that's your employer. But one of my favorite bike shops, you guys have built a couple of my bikes for me. So shout out to Bike World.
Yeah, they're it's an amazing company. I'm blessed to have a good company to work for, and just for Forrest to give me the latitude to take on these crazy things, and not only take it on but encourage it. Is something you don't see very often in corporations or in businesses anymore. Yeah, like I said, if you don't have that support mechanism of work and home life, family, wives, that, I mean, it's a lot for them to take, a lot of extra for them to take on without, being selfless about all these things. And yeah, so if you have those things going for you, then take full advantage of it.
Well, I do know you can go to the Bike World Facebook page and find at least one video that was recorded of you talking about the Great Divide. But do you have any place where people can follow you?
I think from the Continental Divide standpoint, there should be on the Facebook, Bike World's Facebook. I think it's called Dave's Great Adventure.
Cool.
There's a lot of pictures on there, and I kind of give brief descriptions of where we're at and what we're looking at and what we're doing, and it's I try to take nice scenic pictures of everything, and I think that's still active on our site as well.
Awesome. Anything you want to plug?
yeah, just a shout out to everybody who, helps with the cause and is encouraging, and beautiful wife and best friends and businesses. Yeah, just I couldn't have done it without their support and their help, and hopefully it continues in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to your future adventures just so that I can check them out and see if I'm going to add them to my bucket list.
Yeah, do it. I mean, there again, it's I always figure we got this one trip around the block. Let's take full advantage of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Dave, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me on, and hope I hear from you soon.
Well, that's it for this week. Thank you, Dave, for taking the time to chat. Sounds like the Great Divide should be on the bucket list of any cyclist interested in long-distance adventure. Dave described it so well. The wildlife, the scenery, and the great people he met made for an unforgettable adventure. As Dave said, the Great Divide provides a bit of everything America can offer and then some more. If you have a topic or name of a cyclist you find interesting, email me at MurphologyPodcast.com. You can go to MurphologyPodcast.com to find all kinds of good info. I also launched a YouTube channel, so if you want to see videos of some of the places I bike, check that out. I'll leave you with this quote from the Unwritten Book of Murphology. This quote is from today's guest, Dave Puffer. Keep it simple, but be prepared. Think about it.